I trained as a violinist. Because of an injury, I wasn't able to do that as a career. His phone rang and he looked at it and he said, I'm not going to take that because I don't know who they are, and put the phone down. I'm really scared, Jordan, about this thing. Can you help me overcome this fear that I have? Showing signs of weakness can be a sign of inadequacy in many people's eyes.
Welcome to the ISP Podcast, where we speak to salespeople about their journeys to help you demystify the profession. Now, today we are joined by Adam Gray, co-founder of DLA Ignite and Fellow of the Institute of Sales Professionals. How are you doing, Adam?
I'm good, thank you. It's lovely to see you.
Yeah, it's been too long, right?
It has. Well, you've been off getting married and stuff, haven't you? So
I know. Back to the grindstone now.
Well, absolutely.
So initially, Adam, are you able to share a bit more about yourself?
I trained as a violinist, and because of an injury, I wasn't able to do that as a career. So I started to be in retail sales, selling hyper expensive hi-fi systems to people. And I started my own business in that space when I've been doing it for a few years. And then I realized that I had more interest in the marketing and the outbound side than the shopkeeping side. And that kind of has shaped my view of how to prospect and how to get people over the threshold into the store, be that a real shop or a virtual store or whatever. And that's kind of been my career ever since. There's a great book, Atomic Habits, and it talks about how these little incremental improvements and processes are the thing that determine success and failure. And, you know, from every sales training session that you've been on, typically the trainer will tell you something that you already know. And your initial response to that is like, I know this, you know, this is like sales 101. And then if you get challenged with the question, but are you doing this stuff? The answer is invariably, well, no. And I think that sometimes we feel that we outgrow these things because we become expert or we could become very experienced at doing something. And that can be a catastrophically bad mistake. And I think that so often the problems that we have in sales are where we try to skip those steps that we need to take in terms of building a relationship, building rapport, winning trust, before we talk about all the features and functions and all of the benefits bit. We often forget that first step. And, you know, you see it so often when you're interacting with people, from connect and pitch connections on LinkedIn, or cold emails from people telling you that they're an expert in something. And you know, why would I believe you? I've no idea who you are. Why would I believe a word you say until you've built that trust?
Yeah.
So that seems to be a repeating learning in my life. And I think what's interesting is that even though I'm very aware of that learning, I myself still make the same mistakes that everybody else makes. I think it's part of the human condition.
Yeah, indeed. It's falling into those habits. And it reminds me of a Theodore Roosevelt quote: no one cares how much you know until they know how much you care.
Absolutely.
What changes in sales leadership have you noticed and have concerned you the most in recent years?
Typically, sales leaders are old people like me, not young people like you. And I think the problem with that is that the experience that older people have is experience often many years in a world that isn't the world of today. So, and an inability to take a step back and look at the facts rather than what we think is going on. So my business partner, Tim, and I were in a meeting with a sales leader at a large company a couple of years ago. And we were chatting away about the importance, because as you know, we teach organizations how to use social media to have more conversations. And we were pitching this as a concept to this sales leader. And he said, yeah, I'm just going to get my team to do more cold calling, because that's the answer. At which point his phone rang and he looked at it and he said, I'm not going to take that because I don't know who they are, and put the phone down. And then he said, yeah, I'm going to get them to do more cold calling. And we kind of sniggered at the irony of this statement. It's as if there's this lack of pragmatism in people. I have no interest in your product, but you are going to have interest in my product because my product is exciting. The reality is my product's only exciting to me because it pays my mortgage. And I think that often leaders forget that, and it doesn't shape their behavior. Now, I'm not being overly critical of sales methodologies or tools for outreach and scheduling and stuff like this. But so often people are looking to solve a problem that isn't there in sales. So, we haven't got enough pipeline, or we haven't got enough opportunities. Therefore, I need to teach you storytelling. Don't get me wrong, storytelling is a crucial part of being able to sell. But storytelling is only of any value if you have somebody to tell the story to that's prepared to listen to you telling the story.
Yeah.
And that is, in my experience, the area that the issue lies. I've got 15 different sales methodologies at my fingertips, but I haven't got anybody to process, to challenge, to whatever the methodology says. That sales leaders taking a step back and thinking these tools and techniques and processes that have been the bedrock of sales when I was a lad, actually maybe they're not as relevant as they used to be. Yeah. And I think that understanding that and understanding what has replaced them and how do people actually behave, because I think it's a very interesting thing that there can often be a big difference between how people should behave and how people actually behave. And, yes, I've got this fantastic tool that analyzes all of my telephone conversations, and it says when you use the following words, people are more receptive than when you use these words. Okay, well, that helps me shape my telephone pitch. But if all of the people that I'm pitching to are not receptive to my pitch, they're not really listening to me, they don't trust me, then at the very best, you get a skewed view of what words have worked and what words aren't. And at a more pragmatic view, potentially, you're wasting your time having those conversations. Like when somebody says to you, I'm a very experienced IFA, I'd like to talk to you about your investments and your pension strategies. I don't know who you are. I'm not going to tell you anything about my financial situation. Yeah. And it's building that first cornerstone is the most crucial of all, isn't it?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it brought to mind a conversation that I had recently with a leader that they followed MedPick religiously internally. And having a conversation with the sales enablement person, and they said, whenever you talk, or whenever the team talks about paper process, the win rate goes up exponentially. And obviously the paper process that's something that comes later once you've done all the legwork to the discovery, to identify the challenge, building out the solution, and the paper process comes at the end. So of course, it naturally would lend itself to having increased win rate. So to your point about having the data is fantastic, but it's all about how you interpret that data, and being current, having someone that is on the front line getting instant feedback to be able to add that qualitative data into the mix.
Sales is a very macho world, yeah, whether we like it to be or not, and in that, showing signs of weakness can be a major issue or a major sign of inadequacy in many people's eyes. And I think that sales leaders, one of the things that they need to do is to promote a culture of openness. I'm really scared, Jordan, about this thing. Can you help me overcome this fear that I have? And my own experience of that was in my very first proper sales job. As I said, it was selling top-end hi-fi systems to people. And, I was pretty good at demonstrating the stuff because I had a musical background and I was pretty good at engaging with people. But closing was a big issue for me. And part of the reason that closing was a big issue for me is that it's the point where you're basically asking for the date. So when you go to ask a girl out, you are very nervous. That's a perfectly natural thing to be, because you're very invested in the ask and you're very invested in the response. And I remember I went on a sales training course and largely I thought I knew everything. And we got to the end of the course, or towards the end, when the sales trainer was talking about how to close. And I was young, I was like 20 or something at this point. And I said to the sales trainer, so what do you say to close? What do you say to actually get the sale? And he said, we just ask for the sale. And I said, no, you misunderstand me. What words do you use? And he said, oh, I say, well, if you're happy with that, should we just go outside and sort out the paperwork? And I thought, that'll do. So I said that to every single customer that I sat in front of from that point forward. And I became the most successful salesperson in the British hi-fi industry as a result of that. Because I had no shame in asking that question. Because if they bought, and they did most of the time, if they bought, that's great, that was me. And if they didn't buy, well, that's because it was Jordan's words, not mine. And I think that often giving salespeople a series of I don't know, almost like these little vignettes, these little tools that they can use at each point to help them overcome fears that they will have. And for some people, fears, they have a fear of closing. For some people, they have a fear of opening. For some people, they have a fear of presenting. And helping them overcome those fears so that they can use the skills that they've already got embedded and they're really good at, but help to plug the gaps in their kind of either their confidence or their skill set, can be an incredibly powerful tool.
Yeah.
And when we're training people to use social, one of the things that we have to do is we have to give them examples of what works, which is, you can use these exact words until you have something of your own which is better.
Yeah.
Because one of the challenges for any person that's trying to engage either through their emails or through their marketing or through their telephone conversations is that there are things that they will not be able to do. They will not be able to bridge the gap between an abstract concept and a concrete action. So an example of that might be, you need to be really friendly when you send an email to somebody. Okay, so what does a friendly email look like?
Yeah.
Well, part of the way you can bridge the gap is you can say, "Hi, Jordan," rather than "Dear Mr. Abbott." And you give these cues which enable somebody to say, "Okay, I understand how I apply that concept in the real world."
Yeah.
And I think that part of the challenge that, again, what everybody has is that they assume that the people that they're trying to educate or coach or help, that those people are in the same place as them. They have the same knowledge, they have the same understanding, they have the same frame of reference. So me being nearly 60 is entirely different in terms of my view of the world and my understanding of things as you being nearly 30.
Yeah.
Even though you may be better at so many things than me, I've got a different frame of reference. I'm looking at things from a completely different angle. So to make the assumption that you understand the same things that I understand and that I have the same skills gaps that you have is a ludicrous assumption. But nonetheless, it's an assumption that we all make.
Yeah. Yeah, indeed. And I think it's worth mentioning here, we're talking about those simple guiding principles rather than scripts that have to be followed,
Well, I think the problem with the whole scripting thing is that, and I've often said salespeople are lazy, and it's grossly unfair because human beings are lazy. I'm quite good friends with a clinical psychologist, and she says that, this is hardwired into us. If you have to go and get water, you're going to go to the stream right outside your cave, or you're going to walk 5 miles to another stream. Well, clearly you're going to take the easy one. So that's kind of that's baked into us.
Yeah.
And one of the outcomes that we see is that when you're using a sales scheduling tool or some kind of cadencing tool, it typically has sample scripts in it. And the problem that people have is that to work out your own sample script takes time. So for you to rewrite that script is time that you don't feel that you should invest. Now, the output from that is, and we all see this in our inbox, we see every day we get 10 emails from people that say, and I quote, "Hi," insert name, "just bouncing this back to the top of your inbox." Now, that's a set script inside one of these sales scheduling tools. And it says in the sales scheduling tool, "Here's a sample script. You need to replace this with your own words." And yet the person who's sending it goes, "Oh, that's good enough." And they send that. So from 20 different companies and 20 different people, you get exactly the same words in your email. That absolutely makes you feel that you're not being listened to and that you're being processed.
Yeah.
And that's a really bad thing in any complex sale where you need to build a relationship as a rapport with somebody.
Yeah. Yeah, certainly. People are lazy, and we've seen these tech companies sales tech companies profit from a drive for efficiency, which, with all best intentions, was to simplify things. But what we're now seeing is sales organizations are becoming bloated with different tech, with process, with jargon, and we're actually starting to forget the fundamentals, the simpler things that have the biggest impact on relationships, conversations, and trust. Why do you think that sales organizations generally have become obsessed with these complex cadences, scripts, frameworks? And why is it so detrimental to what actually works?
Well, but in fairness, I don't think that it is detrimental. I think it is ineffectual. I think that's the key thing here. So I know. So a client that we worked with, he did a post, and the post received 6.5 million views on LinkedIn, and he got nearly 40,000 likes on the post.
Wow.
And it didn't generate a single piece of inbound. And the reason it didn't is that the world doesn't work that way. You know, if you show something which is incredible in the B2B space, in the B2C space, it's a little bit different. In the B2B space, that it isn't going to do the selling for you. And I know this to be the case, and we all know this to be the case. However, we all hope that our next post will go viral and the phone will start ringing as a result of that. Yeah. Now, I think that most organizations that invest in sales tech, they have a desperate need to believe in the dream that if I buy this piece of sales tech, it will solve this problem and I will generate a constant stream of quantity leads. But it won't, because things don't work that way. And part of the challenge for this is that in the olden days, I could phone you up and say, I have this special injection molding machine. We're the only people in the world that have it. And it'd be really difficult for you to validate that being true or false. Whereas now everybody can validate everything, no matter where they are in the world, in a moment, just by searching online for it. So as a buyer for any product and service, I can look out into the marketplace and I can see there's a million companies that on the face of it look to be doing exactly the same thing that you're doing. It's all about people buying people.
Yeah.
Now, in the old days, if you were selling vacuum cleaners or water filters or whatever, and you were literally knocking on doors, you know, you knock on the first door, you'd say, hi, I've got this fantastic, and they close the door in your face. And you knock on the next door and they go, hi, they close the door, and you knock on the next one and they go, I like you, come in and show me what it is you're selling. And that rapport and friendship and likability and trust was the key determining factor as to whether or not you're going to make a sale to that person or not. Now, when you whiz that forward into the modern world, if you had unlimited time and resources, knocking on doors would be exactly the way to sell stuff today. However, the cost of doing it and the fact that you have to be at the doorway at the same moment that I am to have that conversation is really difficult. But it's still people, you know, building rapport and trust with people. Yeah. And I think that so often we, in our search, and you said it yourself, in the search for efficiency, you know, I don't want to talk to you. I want to talk to 100 yous with one message, because that's a way of building scale. And everybody's obsessed with scale. The problem is that the 100 yous is 100 people that don't want to talk to me then, because they know that they're being farmed. Yeah. Whereas if I looked you in the eye and said, I would really like to talk to you about this because I think this might be able to help you, that's an entirely different feeling. And that's the thing that we should be striving for, I think. And we need to park this efficiency thing. And part of the reason that, you know, the reality of it is that 40 years ago, there was no such thing as sales tech, and 50% of salespeople made their number. Today, there's this huge amount of sales tech. I might be spending $1,000 per person per month in providing people with the CRM, the outreach tools, the emailing tools, the scheduling tools, the voice recognition tools, the auto dialers, all of this stuff. I might be $1,000 a month, and 50% of salespeople make the number. So actually, we're spending all of this money, and we've made no steps forward. Still, half of salespeople don't make their number. Yeah. So where's it going wrong? Sales tech isn't the answer.
Yeah, I agree. And you mentioned earlier this feeling of prospects being processed. You also then just said the prospects are being farmed, and it is that feeling. But if we flip the script and focus on the salesperson, who is the only true and sustainable USP, let's face it.
Yep.
Are we training salespeople to be compliant and consistent rather than being commercially intelligent and authentic?
That's a very good question. And I think that, you know, we see so many anomalies. I worked for a large American tech company a few years ago, and what I saw was that they paid salespeople incredibly well so that they could get the best talent, and then they trained and managed these people as if they were new starters that had no experience. So the very reason they were buying these people was something they were trying to beat out of the people in the onboarding and the training process. And I think that what we need to acknowledge is that I sell things in a very different way to how you sell things for a whole host of reasons. So finding a niche where I'm an attractive proposition is a different niche to where you're an attractive proposition, but it's only through getting the salesperson to exploit their own unique talents, interests, personality, persona, that we can truly get the maximum benefit and the maximum market penetration. Yeah. And I think that acknowledgement that you can't please all of the people all of the time. So if you are yourself, you're really active on social, you've got a very strong personal brand, you put it out there and you make no apologies for who you are. Some people will see that and they'll go, I love him, he's great, I can't wait for his content, he's always front of mind with me, he's the man. Some people will watch it and go, I don't like him at all. Well, that's fine, because actually what we're looking for is that group of people that love us, not this group of people that are prepared to tolerate us. I think we're average. Yeah. And I think that we need to empower salespeople to be themselves, knowing that some people will love you, some people will hate you. And that's okay, because the people that love you can't shop somewhere else. And the people that hate you, if they start to deal with you and they get to know you, they're not going to buy from you anyway, because ultimately they don't like you. They don't like who you are. Yeah. And that's okay. And I think that so often we try to deliver in our sales outreach, in our marketing, in how we present. We're trying to do a one size fits all. I'm trying to remove all of the very things that make me unique and different in the marketplace as a salesperson. And that must be a recipe for disaster in my view.
Yeah, I agree. So how can we change that? Is it a case of sales leaders needing to rethink KPIs, rethink incentives and the support and enablement to encourage that diversity that will inevitably lead to increased success?
I think so. And I think that, so for KPIs, and I don't mean this as a sales pitch, but the importance of social is that it fills the top of funnel area. The problem, as I see it with the existing sales process, is that I'm going to undertake a series of activities which are, by nature of the structure of those, likely to turn people off rather than on. So I've got this sales scheduling tool which professes to be best practice, in quotes, and it means that I'm going to send you an email on day 1. I'm going to telephone you on day 3. I'm going to send you a connection request on day 4. I'm going to telephone you again on day 7. I'm going to send you a follow-up email on day 8. I'm going to telephone you again on day 9. That sounds to me like that's a recipe for getting me blocked on all platforms. And invariably, in the salesperson or the company's desire to make a sale, the cold outreach begins with, hi Jordan, we've helped loads of organizations just like yours achieve the following improvements. And A, you don't know anything about my organization. And B, this is like me walking up to you as somebody that I find really attractive, walking up to you in a bar and saying, hi, it's nice to meet you. Will you marry me, please? Yeah. Now, I may propose, but probably there should be a few steps between that initial introduction and the proposal. And I think that often sales structures and processes don't allow for that. So the idea that you're going to fill that top of funnel, people who are aware of you, you're going to build a conduit to those people. And then over time, you're going to acknowledge that some people will percolate through that funnel, not based on my sales process, but based on their buying process. We know that 95% of people are not in market to buy at the moment. So if I treat you as if you're going to buy, A, I haven't kept my powder dry. So I've got this fantastic offer, I can sell you this now, and you say, I'm under contract for the next 3 years. And I go, okay, well, I don't want to talk to you then, and walk away. That's very unattractive, because clearly I reek of commission breath if I've done that. But the idea that you can engage with me at the point that you're ready to take the conversation forward, and that requires me to fill that funnel. But I won't fill the funnel if the pretext on which we're connecting is one of, I'm going to sell you something to sort out this particular problem, because that's not a problem you've got at the moment. So what I need to do is I need to build a large network of people that constantly are reminded of who I am, so that when the problem or the buy cycle emerges, I'm front of mind. And with a bit of luck, you may have had 6 months, 12 months, 3 years of consuming my content and getting to know me.
Yeah.
So Tim, my business partner, and I were at an event a couple of weeks ago, and a guy that I've never spoken to, that I don't think has engaged with any of my content, walked up to me and he said, hi, Adam, I love the guitar playing. I loved your post of yesterday. I just wanted to say, keep up the good work. So this is a guy that's a senior sales leader that was consuming my content because we'd connected, and he just happened to be exposed to this stuff over a period of time. Now, the beauty of that is that now I know who he is, but not because I've knocked on his door, but because he's knocked on mine. Yeah. Fantastic. It doesn't get better than that. But I think that those KPIs we need to set need to drive that output. You know, how many calls you've made where everybody hangs up on you is not a KPI for success. how many people you have got within the orbit of your content is, the only KPI in which you should be rewarded is how much stuff you sell. And then mapping back from that, so 10 of these equals 5 of these, 5 of these equals 2 of these, 2 of these equals 1 of these. That's the way that you build that success. And it doesn't come from filling your pipeline with hopes and dreams in order to keep your manager happy. It comes from tangible things that mean something. I want to sell into company X. Last month, I had 5 connections in company X. Now I've got 105 connections in company X. So I've only added 100 connections to my network, but I've increased by a factor of 20 how relevant the people are with that. So I've now got 20 times as many people that I'm trying to engage in a conversation with a view to selling something within the orbit of the content that I'm sharing. That's an important KPI. So of those 105 people, how many of them have I had some sort of exchange with? Either I've commented on them and they've commented back, or I've sent them a message and they've responded to my message. Because if I send you a message and you don't respond, it's not worth anything.
Yeah.
If I send you a message and you do, it is worth something. So how many of those 105 have now I had some sort of dialogue with? Well, 7. Okay, so that's 7 interactions that I've had. How many of those 7 interactions have I asked to have a call? And how many have said yes? And how many have attended the call? That sounds to me like that's a much more meaningful way of getting to the bottom of a sales pipeline, rather than saying, well, Jordan, I've sent him 6 emails and I've left 4 voicemails for him and I've sent him a connection request, none of which he's responded to. That sounds like you're being ghosted, not like you've made any progress.
Yeah.
So identifying the KPIs that actually mean something, that are leading indicators for the outcome that you're trying to achieve, is a much more modern way of doing it.
It sounds very simple, sort of reverse engineering, but how would a leader actually go about running that audit to identify what's actually helping the rep sell versus what's just noise?
Well, I think, first of all, the sales leader needs to have a strong grasp of what modern selling looks like, and being able to control those KPIs, but equally learning from what has worked within their organization, and seeing these kind of paradoxes that crop up. So some years ago, Tim and I flew out to Chicago to train the American wing of an organization. And one of the people, and in fairness to him, he'd done this off his own bat before we had got there. He had used Sales Navigator to map, within one of his key accounts, to map all of the people at various locations that he was selling to. So they were selling a quite technical product, and there were a series of warehouses within this particular key account. And he messaged all of the people in each of those warehouses saying, I'm coming to your city in May. I'd love to meet you for a coffee, please. So he flew to each of these different locations. He went to each of these warehouses, and he met everybody. He basically had back-to-back meetings for the day. And the meeting typically went this way, as anyone that's been in sales knows. He sat down with the person, they had a chat, how's it all going? They built a bit, got to know each other a little bit. And then the person that was the customer said, while you're here, have you got your order book? And he's like, yeah. They go, right, well, we're running low on this and this and this and this and this. So we need some of these and some of these and some of these and some of these. And every single person gave him a series of orders. So he went back to headquarters, and he had taken that key account and he had increased that quarter's sales to them by a factor of 5, which is a real success story. The paradox comes that this man had 7 key accounts, and that was one of them, and he didn't do that for the other 6. So why not? And secondly, why did the sales manager not say, that's remarkable what you've done there, Jordan. Tell us as a team how you achieved that huge uplift in sales.
Yeah.
And part of this is about, and I think I said earlier on, he used the phrase about the difference between what happens and what should happen. We all know what should happen, but actually often that isn't what happens for whatever reason. And identifying what works for you when you have those success stories and trying to understand how you can replicate that. Either you replicate it as your own personal process, or perhaps as a sales manager, your job is to say, let's take that process and see if you can scale that across the organization, because that's where the wins come.
Yeah. Yeah, indeed. It creates that multiplicative effect, right? Because if we're all running our own little tests, we can feedback what's working to have greater impact. And equally, we can share what's not working to save everyone some time, or to just reaffirm if it's just not working for me in my area, or whether it is something that just generally doesn't work.
And understanding how, if I've been really successful doing this particular thing and you can't get it to work, how can I coach you to be able to get this to work.
Yeah.
And you know, I think that this not exactly ambivalence, but this coldness that we need to have to you know, I invented this process. You cannot make this process work. It might be that the process is crap. Yeah. You know, I have to acknowledge that my idea may not be working, or this is not applicable to this vertical, or this is not right in that particular region. Yeah. And need to not feel too wedded to this stuff. Because at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is revenue. And, you know, having a full pipeline, I'm sure everybody in sales has filled their pipeline in part with stuff that they know is never going to close, because they've been told you need 7 times coverage in your, or whatever your industry current thinking. You need 7 times coverage in part-time. Why? You need 1 times coverage if you're going to close it all.
Yeah.
And you know, increasingly, particularly for listed companies, increasingly, the most important thing is accuracy of forecast. So if I've got 3 things in my pipeline and they're all going to close this quarter, and I can tell you as my boss, these 3 things, I stake my reputation on the fact these 3 things are going to close, and they close, that's much better than saying, well, I've made my number, but I've had to over forecast by a factor of 50 in order to convince you not to sack me. No. It's ludicrous behavior. And you know, part of this is about being able to say, actually, you know, I've got no deals at the moment. Nobody's listening to this. Because I can either point the finger at you and say, well, that's because you're not working hard enough, and whip you a bit harder. Or I can say, does anyone else see that? Yeah, well, this seems to be a universal theme. That, okay, so what's happened between last year and this year in order that nobody's got any opportunities now? Yeah. And it could be something like there's a geopolitical change or a regulatory change. It could be that the messaging is no longer applicable to people. It could be that there's a new entrant into the market that's challenging us and undercutting us. But ultimately, you know, identifying this and using every interaction that we have with our sales team as a data gathering exercise. What are you finding? Well, I'm finding it really easy to have this part of the conversation. Easy to start a conversation with people, very difficult to get a next action. Okay, so what's going on during that first conversation that you're not getting a next action? And it could be that the product's not applicable, you're targeting the wrong people. It could be that you're not very good at delivering that initial conversation. Because at least then we can say, okay, here's an area where you need some help. Let's see if we can upskill you or train you or give you more confidence to do this stuff. Because ultimately, and I think Andy, the founder of ISP, he said, no salesperson goes into sales in order to fail. You know, they all want to be successful, and it's our job to give them the skills and the confidence and the abilities and the techniques they need to be successful. Yeah. And the fact that you're not being successful at the moment, that's not a reflection on you not working hard. That's a reflection on you missing some of the pieces of the puzzle. And our chairman said that in sales, it's a series of 1s and 0s that you multiply together. And if you've got a 0 somewhere, the output is 0. So you need to find your 0. And that's the bit you need to focus on fixing.
Yeah, indeed. And creating that culture where it's okay to actually take that look inward, be transparent, be honest, rather than, as we've discussed, essentially polishing a turd in the pipeline. Which doesn't enable you to identify what that key thing that needs to change is. If I can ask you one last question, if there is one message that you'd want all sales leaders listening to take away, what is it?
Okay, it's a message for salespeople that sales leaders need to promote, and it's this. In the homogenized world in which we now live, every product is fit for purpose, and your product may be better in some areas than others, or it may have some unique function that you think is a USP and matters to everybody, but it probably doesn't, which is why you're not 600% of your target. So in this modern, particularly AI-driven world, the only USP you have is your people. And getting each of your salespeople to reflect truly who they are will open far more doors than new messaging or a new go-to-market strategy, because people buy people. With complex, high-value strategic purchases, people buy people. They always have and they always will. And your messaging, if I don't trust the person that I'm talking to and I don't like the person, I'm A, not going to listen, and B, not believe what they say even if I do. So tackle that first.
Yeah, I love that. Great message to end on. Adam, thank you once again. If anyone does want to reach out, obviously, LinkedIn is
the place. Yes.
And I would highly recommend that everyone does not give you a follow, send a connection.
Absolutely, that would be fantastic.
Perfect. Adam, thank you. And
great pleasure.
To everyone listening, until next time. next week on the ISP Podcast.
It was always the men that were dominating all the conversations. I was asked a question in a team meeting, and immediately my peer cut me off. How can I actually help this person to rebuild confidence in themselves? They made her re-believe in herself, that I believe in her, and I will always have her back. She developed confidence in herself because she was speaking to customers, speaking to prospects. She became my number one rep and still is the number one in everything that she does.